वक्रतुंड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभ निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा. First of all, I offer my obeisance to the divine in you. Pretty much in all the scriptures, there is a very important word, a word without which your penance, your sadhana, your practices are going to be incomplete. So I'm going to cover that word today. If you can get the essence of this word, or if I can successfully explain this to you and get the point across to you, your chances of success are going to increase manifold. The word is purity. Whatever you do on the path of self-realization, you cannot discount purity. What do I mean by the word purity? Or what do I mean when I say pure? Does pure mean that you take care of your physical purity? Or does that mean that you take care of your mental purity or moral purity? All of these put together, when combined, create what's called spiritual purity. It is only in a state of spiritual purity that you are going to experience anything divine. Without a pure mind, purity of your discipline, it is not possible to rise above intellect. Until such time that you rise above intellect, you are not going to experience your true nature. What do I mean by moral purity or purity of discipline? This word, purity, is probably going to come many times today in my lecture. So, be prepared for that. You may think it's repetition, but really, until you instill purity in your mind, in your actions, in your thoughts, and in your speech, you are not going to experience anything divine. You may do the hardest of all penances that there are. You may practice severe austerities. That is not going to lead to a divine experience. So let us begin with the concept of purity. Why is it important at the first place? Imagine you buy a really expensive mirror. Let's say you spend $10,000 buying that mirror. The mirror is exquisite. It renders images perfectly. Now, envision that you cover that mirror with some covering, be it of dust, of clothes, of something that makes the mirror opaque, that covers the mirror so that it is no longer able to show your own image in it. Think about it for a moment. You have the most expensive mirror, but it is not solving the purpose because it is unable to render the images. And same is the state of your mind. unless you have a pure mind, you cannot really attain that supreme state of meditation. The thing that is called samadhi or trance or meditational equipoise or tranquil equipoise or yogic trance cannot be experienced till such time that you have a pure mind. So you may have the finest body, you may have a really fine brain, a very sharp intellect. However, until your mind is pure, you are not going to experience anything divine, anything profound. You will continue to understand, assimilate, and assess, and make sense of everything through the mind. The goal is to rise above the mind. So, to get to that, there are many steps Patanjali describes in his aphorisms. They are yama, niyama, asana. The first three form the basis of, first is moral purity. It talks about, things like non-stealing and non-violence and truthfulness and celibacy and stuff like that. They contribute to moral purity of a person. The second part, which is niyama, the second kind of rung of the ladder, talks about what we call mental purity. So it talks about, how you need to spend time studying various scriptures and things like that. The third is asana. Asanas, or physical postures, are designed for physical purity. The more you gain that purified state of the body, of your nervous system, or more importantly, central nervous system, the more you're ready to develop concentration. The fourth is pranayama, which is regulation of the breath, which is basically, in a way, purifying the vehicle of meditation or concentration. Because unless there is breath in you, how are you going to meditate? How are you going to concentrate? Then he talks about a concept called pratyahara. It means withdrawal of senses. Now that is spiritual purity. You cannot withdraw your senses from contemplating on material objects until you have purified yourself at the four levels. So that discipline of, that purity of discipline is the key. Until you stick to your discipline and do so in a qualitative fashion, you are not going to experience any purity. Imagine a glass of water. The water in the glass is salty. And your job is to make it pure. Your job is to purify the water. Your job is to make it taste like it used to be. Now you have a couple of options to do that. One is you keep pouring fresh water in the in that glass, and there's gonna be a time when there will be no salty water left in the glass. When that happens, you would have purified the water at that point in time. But how about evaporating? How about the process of distillation? Could that remove impurities? The answer is yes. However, it is clear that until you really, in a disciplined fashion, do the practice of purifying the water is not going to be purified. You can have a glass full of water in front of you, and you can chant all the mantras on the planet that talks about purification of the water. You can read all the texts, all the scriptures, but that is not going to purify the water, is it? And that's exactly what I'm getting at. Till such time that you stick to your discipline, you have the purity of discipline. The discipline in itself is incomplete, inadequate, insufficient, and is not gonna cut it. So you really have to have the purity of discipline, of moral discipline, of intellectual discipline, purity of physical discipline, purity of spiritual discipline. It is when you are going to live in that purity, breathe that purity, think that purity, and drink that purity, that you are going to experience the real nature of yogic practices. Whether you are a bhakta, that is a devotional person, or if you are a yogi, or somebody aspiring to be a yogi, in either case, you must stick to the practice basically unconditionally. You must stick to the practice with utmost purity. And you will see the results very quickly if you do that. If you're gonna stay impure, if you're gonna just do the things because you have to do them or because somebody's asked you to do them, but not really do them with purity, you are not going to feel any of the things yogic texts state. And that's something to remember forever. Forever, that is. Imagine a piece of cloth that is soiled, it is sullied, and it is no longer clean. Can you clean, let's say, a crystal bowl with that unclean cloth? The cloth is oiled and soiled. Can you clean it? Chances are, if you are going to start cleaning that crystal bowl with that cloth, you are going to actually make it more dirty. And that's what I mean. If you are going to attempt, even try cleansing your mind or your soul with views or with processes or with discipline that is not pure at the first place, how on earth can you expect to perform the cleansing? And if you don't perform the cleansing, how are you going to experience your true nature? The mirror that is unclean, the mirror that is now covered with dust, needs to be cleaned. Your true nature is hiding behind the dirt. It is hiding behind the dirt of your attachments, your desires, your expectations, your bad karma, even your good karma. It is hiding behind your anger and all those emotions. Until you perform the cleansing exercise, you are not going to see your true nature. And that's something you need to remember. And that's something you need to work towards. So what do I mean by moral purification? You see, morality is the basis of all virtues. Morality is the key. Morality is the foundation, the mother of all virtues. A moral life, always, without exceptions, results in peace. Deep in your heart, deep in your conscience, you always know moral from immoral. Right or wrong may be subjective, but moral or immoral are not. So whether that is practicing non-violence, truth, non-stealing, and things like that, I am going to elaborate on these some other day when we talk about in detail the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, his aphorisms. But for now, I just want to stay focused on the topic of purity and the concept of purity. So moral purity is when you imbue and instill morality in absolutely everything you do. When you morally purify yourself, and when you physically start to live a clean life, you would start to move towards spiritual purification. But somewhere in between these two come the concept of mental purification. Right now I'm reminded of a verse from Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says to Arjuna that after reading so much of literature from various sources, you stand deluded, my friend. Krishna says to Arjuna that you stand confused. And because your mind is deluded, that's why the world is attracting you. That's why the illusory nature of the world is still attractive to you. But once you are firmly established in the practice of yoga, Krishna says, you will no longer feel these things. You will start to see your true nature, and you will no longer be deluded or illusioned about the reality of things. So, mental purification is about you have intellectually absorbed a lot of things that are borrowed from sources that are not authentic, from people who haven't had first-hand experience. Never ever underestimate the power of direct experience. So you have accumulated knowledge from those who did not pass it on based on experiential knowledge, but did so based on second-hand knowledge. They read it somewhere, they heard it from somewhere, and they passed it on to you, and you accepted it. Or you analyzed it, but not in detail, because till your mind is steady, you cannot do analysis. Simple as that. You can say whatever you like, but the fact is, till your mind is steady, still and settled, and stabilized, and pacified and calm, it is not possible to carry out deep analysis into anything at all. So mental purification is about unlearning. Mental purification is about getting rid of all the rubbish that you have acquired over years. Believe it or not, it is a very important aspect of yogic practices. Unlearning. I spent a great deal of my time unlearning a lot that I knew. Imagine you belong to Australia. Imagine you're an Australian. You drive on the left side of the road and you move to America. There they drive on the right side of the road. Now you have to get your driver's license in the US. I hope you agree that in order to get your license in the States, you have to unlearn some of the ways you learned in Australia. You learned in Australia that driving on the left is the way to go. You learned in Australia that giving way to the traffic from the right on a roundabout is what you need to do. But it's exactly the opposite in the States. To correctly learn the ways of the States, you have to unlearn the ways of Australia. So the same goes for yogic practices. The same goes for many things that you would encounter on the path of self-realization. There are things you have to unlearn. And when you unlearn, your mind becomes ready to learn something new. I'm reminded of a little story. There was a guy, very well read. He was a PhD, a professor in a state university. He hears about this monk who had recently come to the town. he heard that the monk has some wonderful things to offer and direct experiential knowledge. So one fine day, he decides to go to the monk. He goes there and with complete disregard to the basic mannerisms of how you approach somebody you want to learn from, certainly from the Eastern point of view, he just goes there, takes his seat and says, please give me some knowledge, give me some jnana, he says. The monk says, oh, sure. What is the rush? He says. Why don't you have a cup of tea first? He goes. He says, oh yeah, I surely would like a cup of tea. So the monk makes tea for the professor. He gives professor a cup, an empty cup, and starts pouring in the tea. And he keeps on pouring. And the cup is full now. But he keeps on pouring. The cup starts to overflow. The tea, the hot tea I should say, starts to overflow and gets onto the hand of the professor who's holding the cup. And he shouts out loud, saying, oh my God, can't you see? The cup is full. You cannot fit any more tea in there. I'm done. Thank you very much. I don't want more tea. And the monk goes, that's exactly what I want you to know. If you are going to come full, how can I give you any more? So first, empty yourself of the preconceived notions you have, of the perceptions you have, of all the rubbish you have in your head about who you are and what all you know. Clear yourself of those first, and then come back to me, and I will give you knowledge. Right now, you're so full, you have no space, no place left for knowledge. So mental purification is about clearing up and cleansing your mind from all the silly things you have learned over the years from half-cooked sources, half-baked knowledge that you have not put to experience, knowledge you have not validated or authenticated or verified, knowledge you have just accepted. When you are done reading or when you are done gratifying your intellect, that is the time you are ready for meditation. That is the time when you are ready for self-discovery. Let's say you set a discipline, I am going to meditate an hour a day no matter what. Some days maybe you need to take a break, okay? That is part of the discipline. But when you start to say to yourself, you know what, today I'm very, very tired, so let me skip my meditation today. You have just made your discipline impure. And if you sit down for an hour and you don't feel like meditating, but you say, you know what, I'm just going to sit down anyway. Once again, that is not purification, that is not purity of the discipline. So the purity of the physical discipline is going to be sit in the posture you have to sit at the time you have to sit, meditate when you have committed, when you have made a resolution that I'm going to meditate at this time of the day. Your mental purification at that point in time is actually meditating. Your mind is distracted, it's running in all the different directions. Keeping it to continue to bring it back to the object of meditation is what you need to do. So at that point in time, it does not matter what you want. That's what you have to do, and that's what you gotta do if you want results. So quality, very key. Now, you decide you're going to spend some time self-analyzing or, self-inquiry as it's called. You have to do it. Whether the path is easy or hard, whether it is straight or windy, it can be as zigzag as anything. The fact is, until you tread it, you're not going to enjoy the journey. And I'm just requesting you to stay away from an intellectual journey, because that will take you away from the path of self-realization. That is not going to get you to self-realization, that is going to move you away, far, far away from self-realization. Self-purification, self-analysis, self-discovery, and self-realization. This is how it moves. You work on your purification with a calm mind now, or calmer mind I should say. You will be ready to analyze yourself, consequently stabilize yourself and discover yourself, and then realize yourself. And then all of this can stop. Imagine a student who's in grade 6 in the school, and he passes the grade with flying colors. He no longer needs the books of the previous class he's just graduated from, does he? So once you have gotten yourself to a certain level, a lot of things will cease to matter for you. And that's what self-realization is about. When you are no longer dependent on anything external at all, when you're no longer dependent on people, on circumstances, on things, on achievements, on attainments for happiness or lack of it, you are self-realized. And when you can stay in that state, no matter what, all the time, every moment of your life, you are self-realized. When the only thing you give out is love, you are self-realized. When the only thing that you can do under all circumstances, disagreeable circumstances I mean, when the only thing you do is forgive, you are self-realized. Because these are the signs of a self-realized person. They have limitless compassion, generosity, forgiveness. Because when you are self-realized, you come to understand that this is what life is about. Naturally what you feel for everybody is compassion. Anybody's pain is as painful as will cause you as much agony and grief as to the person who actually has it. That is self-realization. Because why? You start to see everybody in you and you in everybody. I'm not talking about the physical body. I'm talking about the purest form of your soul. Something we may call self or soul. And that is all you got to remember. So, in summary, purification. Mental purification, physical purification, intellectual purification, moral purification will lead to your self-purification. When you stand self-purified, you are ready to do self-analysis. That will lead you to the path of self-discovery, and that will take you further to the path of self-realization. This is the way to go, my friend. If you liked what I said, you are free to keep it. Else, you are free to just discard it. Thank you very much. That's all I have for you today. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Om Tat Sat, Hare Om Tat Sat, Hare Om Tat Sat.